Welcome to 2019 and another year of Dan Really Likes Wine, and a very exciting year for the South African wine industry. I'm getting a real sense from the end of last year, beginning of this year, that there's some exciting developments afoot, cool people doing cool stuff, and the perception of South African wine internationally only getting higher. And that's not to be unexpected because our wine is really good, but it's nice to see nonetheless. A lot of that wine, though, will refer to wine that's a little higher up the spectrum, wine that costs a little more, wine that's made a name for itself by virtue of the fact that it's particularly good but comes with an appropriate price, which, if you're in January and you're licking your wounds post-Christmas and the January debit orders, means you're probably not going to be buying. As good as a 2015 Kanonkop Paul Sour might be, if you can get your hands on one, you're probably unlikely to be wanting to shell out that sort of money in January. So this week and next week, I've decided, as I've done in the past, to have a look at some wine that's a little better value, a little more approachable, a little more affordable, but still does the job of giving you a really nice bottle of South African wine. And the four I've got this week are 4 South African whites, and all of them, I think, are really good value and pretty nice wine as well. So the first of these is a wine you will have seen me drink before if you've been following social media. Last year on Dan's Epic Wine Route, as I made my way through Robertson, I arrived at Bon Courage. Now usually I head to Bon Courage because I love the work they do with bubbles, some really, really good Cap Classique, and that certainly hasn't changed, but what has added to that is the range of the rest of their wine. And this is one that I was given by a couple of locals. They said, Dan, you must try this. And I'm always a little skeptical when the name of the wine is trying to lead me too far down the path of a particular taste or flavour. In this case, the Gooseberry Bush Sauvignon Blanc. If it tastes like gooseberries, I should be able to work that out myself. But it's a marketing ploy. It works quite well. We're seeing more of it, particularly with chocolate and coffee type wines, but also a lot more with our white wines and the kind of fruits they might relate to. If it gives people a pointer as to the kind of taste, the kind of wine they do like already, then it's not really hurting anyone, I suppose. Nonetheless, I had a first taste of this with a little bit of reluctance, and I was very, very pleasantly surprised. It was a really nice Sauvignon Blanc. It's only a 2018, but it was softer than I was anticipating, and it did have a really nice tropical feel. That was about 7-8 months ago, so today, to see if it is still quite as good as it was back then. Very clean, light colour and a fairly typical Sauvignon Blanc nose, a little fruitier, which I suppose, if the wine is called Gooseberry Bush, is not entirely unexpected. And as with the first time I tried it, that is very nice indeed. Probably had slightly more of an impact the first time around because I wasn't expecting what I got, but still chilled, and over summer, this is a really nice, inexpensive Sauvignon Blanc. And you're probably looking here at I think about 60 rand a bottle. So it's maybe a little bit more expensive than some other Sauvignon Blancs, but I think for what you're getting, it really is good value indeed. Very nice Sauvignon Blanc at a price that in January I think is just about manageable. Our second of this week's wines comes from just down the road from Bon Courage, not too far at all. This is McGregor. And McGregor is teeming with large volumes of very inexpensive wine that are pretty good. And you walk in, you look at the prices, and then you look at all these labels and you start to wonder, did they make those themselves on the internet and stick them on? But a little bit of research shows that's not the case. They are deserved accolades that have been more than fairly won for wine that does a really important job. It offers a good, solid product at a really reasonable price. And McGregor, I think, is one of the better value wine estates, wine producers across all of South Africa. Nothing is too expensive, and they also make some quite interesting wine. Colombard is not something we see a huge amount of, but Colombard is something McGregor makes. I remember it from growing up in Zimbabwe. My parents would drink it. If you could get wine in Zimbabwe, it probably meant it wasn't that expensive, and Colombard certainly fit the bill then. And here it fits the bill even more so, because this bottle of Colombard is 38 rand or thereabouts. That is incredibly inexpensive, but what does it taste like? When you have a look at tasting notes for a Colombard, there's one fruit that comes up consistently, and that is a guava, and it's pretty hard to miss the guava in this tropical style of wine that is clearly working out in the greater Robertson McGregor area, because Bon Courage, you made the Sauvignon Blanc we've just tried, also make a Colombard. It's a Colombard I tried when I was there. I enjoyed that one. I enjoyed this one as well, especially at the price. It's a little heavier, a little bit more structure than a Sauvignon Blanc. The term food wine is one generally I try and avoid, but you can sense there are a lot of meals where this would complement what you were eating really, really nicely. It's got a little bit more depth, it's got a little bit more structure, as I said, and again, 38 rand a bottle. I think you're onto a real winner with a grape you might not have had a huge amount of experience of, in which case, here's an investment. If you don't like it, well, 38 rand is probably an amount of money you can afford to spend on something to see whether or not you like it. Now, if McGregor makes some pretty good value wine, then these guys just about write the book, along with Du Toitskloof, who you'll see next week with one of their reds. These are three guys I always have a look at who consistently deliver such good value for money. And there's a huge need for that in South Africa. Yes, there are all the big award-winning wines that we love and justifiably celebrate, but many of them can be 200, 300, 400 rand a bottle or even more, and there are a lot of people who simply cannot afford to drink that at all, let alone on a regular basis. And so we need to find wine that fills those gaps. We don't want to stop drinking and celebrating our wine, but we need some wine that allows us, especially in January, to get through the month with a nice glass or two. And Imbuko is the answer to that particular prayer. You can see it's got some awards. It's got a double gold from Michelangelo. And again, this bottle of wine, I think you're looking at about 40, 42 rand a bottle, if that. So again, really, really good value. This is a Chenin. My Chenin Crusade will continue into 29 to keep drinking more of it because it is so, so good when we make it. But a lot of the Chenin I've been drinking of late has been a little higher up in the market. How's one going to come in at 42 rand a bottle? And I'll comfortably say that if I'd been asked in a blind taste to give that a price point, I wouldn't have gone 200-300 rand, but I certainly wouldn't have been anywhere as low as 40 rand or thereabouts. There's a nice little whiff of citrus on the nose, and then when you get into it, that warm, comforting Chenin feel, just that a little bit of crunch to it. We really do make this grape well. So there we go, 40 rand a bottle for some Chenin Blanc that's got the awards and has my endorsement as well for what that's worth. Add this one to your list for January. And then to probably the most interesting of the four wines for this week. This is an 80 rand bottle of Chardonnay, I think. 80 rand, there or thereabouts. And it is a label you might look at and think, oh, that's just destined for the tourists, isn't it? The Cape Town Wine Company. And when I looked at it, I thought something fairly similar myself, because there's no history to it. Cape Town's a big city. This is clearly just to take advantage of an international wine drinking market. And that's partly true, but by no means entirely. The partly true is that, yes, Cape Town's got a great label. It's a city known around the world. We're trying to market our wines as a whole. And if this is going to help to spread the gospel of South African wine by being good wine, then I'm all for it. I've got no problem with that at all. But what it also taps into, if you look very closely down the bottom, you'll see Wine of Origin Cape Town. Now, Wine of Origin Cape Town is something you wouldn't have seen until last year when the appellation was first approved. We have our Wine of Origin Stellenbosch and Paarl and coastal region. This, though, is the first time that Cape Town has been properly acknowledged. And it's both right, I think, because of the history of wine in the Cape, in Constantia in particular, but also because, again, it leads into the marketing. And we're trying as South Africa to compete against people from all over the world, particularly people like the dastardly Australians who've got vast budgets to throw at wine marketing. So we need to do whatever we can to try and get a foot up. And so Sebrand, the guy behind Cape Point Vineyards, is the man behind this particular label. There's some other wines as well. Had a taste of the rosé, but this is my first taste of the Chardonnay. 70, 80 rand a bottle or thereabouts. The key thing though is that if it's celebrating Cape Town, if it's going out to showcase wine of origin Cape Town and being from the Cape, at 70, 80 rand a bottle, it's got to be wine that I think is good enough to reflect what we can do in what is one of the world's foremost winemaking areas. It's a Chardonnay headlined by the sort of bitter citrus that you expect to get in a lot of Chardonnay. Not quite so much of the butter or the cream, but a wine that probably, given this is only 2018, might pick up on some of those attributes with just a little bit more time. But I think it's nice enough Chardonnay indeed. There's certainly better examples in South Africa, but you won't find too many better examples at this sort of price, which, for the sake of January, is absolutely key. And what January for me offers is the chance to nip down to your local Pick n Pay, your local Spar, your local Woolworths, have a bit of a look around, see what's in there, find a couple of bottles you've never heard of, pick out a few, have a look for the occasional sticker. There are a lot of them about that suggest a wine is of particularly good value. Try it out and you might discover what a lot of South African wine drinkers have been over the last few years, that it's not just the top end of the market where we're making some particularly good wine. Next week we'll try out some red equivalents. In the meantime, spend those rand wisely till we get to payday at the end of the month and enjoy some great South African wine at some even better prices. Cheers.